to fear is
In war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live. You can find out more at wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. We call it the intersection of faith and politics because we're applying both a biblical and historical point of view to the issues of our culture today. David, huge issue, of course, and important to the entire culture is that of our families. And obviously have had a real breakdown in the family over the last 30 or 40 years. It's had a big impact on our crime, on our cost of government, the growth of government, all those things. So sometimes we want to just come back to these basics that may not sound like a political issue, but it really affects politics, and that is how we handle our families.
You know, and a person who's really good on this, and by the way, part of the problem we have with our families is a lack of leadership, and that's part of the fatherhood aspect that's missing. And this is not that there is a big difference between mothers and fathers, and that's why you mentioned all the studies and polling that show that when you have a mother and a father in the home, that the kids are less likely to have emotional troubles, less likely to have physical trouble, less likely to join gangs, less likely to be involved in crime, less likely to have educational problems. I mean, the studies are just irrefutable. So feminazis and the feminists and the progressives and the anti-nuclear family folk can all say what they say about how they don't like it, but you can't argue with the results. Well, I guess they can. They just ignore the results. But what you need is you need leadership in the family, and that comes very often from the father. But the father and mother are a team. It's not like, you know, one lords it over the other, and that's what the scripture is very clear about. You have a team on this thing, and there are certain traits that you get from both mother and father that you need. And when that's absent in the home, it's tough on kids. And so we've seen that over and over again. And one of the guys who's really good on leadership is Max Lucado. Max Lucado, one of our friends that we often talk to on the program here, is Tom Mullins. And Tom Mullins is pastor of that church of 50,000 in Florida. And Tom is on the board of Max Lucado's Leadership Institute. And what they've done is they've taken these principles of leadership. And I was just talking to Tom, and they just got back from Guatemala, and I think it was like 26,000 leaders in Guatemala. They had police chiefs, and they had the city mayors, and they had school board folks, all these folks, and they taught them Max's principles of leadership and how to apply them in civil government. And they're seeing real changes. They did this several months ago, and the first implementation has been done. They've gone back. They're already seeing changes in the nation nationally. So they did a much larger conference and these are civic leaders. So there are principles of leadership that are very, very successful. Max gets these out of the Bible, and now he's done a book that really turns to kind of family leadership and fatherhood and how important that is in a family. So it's just another aspect of leadership, but it is really good to have someone who's an expert on leadership talking about leadership in the family, and that involves fatherhood, quite frankly.
How many leaders did you say?
26,000. 26,000.
Man, so you've really got, I mean, they just want to know what works, right? It's not even necessary. They may not even be coming from a faith perspective.
Oh,
they just
not.
want good leadership skills. And of course, we know those best come from a faith perspective, but they just want to know what works. So what an opportunity for Pastor Lucado to teach in that environment.
Yeah, and it's really cool because it is not from a faith perspective. They're all biblical principles, but they're presented in just a cultural environment. This is what works, and this is what you want. If you want your corruption to be gone from these areas, these are the leadership principles you have to exercise. These are leadership traits you need to display. This is what you need to show those who work under you, and it will take care of all these problems. And they're finding it's working it's crazy the way it's working. And so they're wanting more of these conferences and bringing in more and more leaders. I think they started with 1,500 civic leaders. This last conference was 26,000 civic leaders because it's working so well. So these are principles of leadership that do work, and now Max has really turned that leadership thing in the direction of the family, inside the family. Great stuff, great writing, great insight.
The new book is called Dad Time, Savoring the God-Given Moments of Fatherhood. Max Lucado is the author, and he'll be with us when we return right here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Today, there are numerous documented accounts of individual students being disciplined simply for bringing a Bible to school. Fisher Ames would have been appalled at this open hostility toward the Bible. Fisher Ames was the founding father who authored the House of Representatives language for the First Amendment. In his day, he vehemently objected to any attempt to minimize the Bible at schools. In fact, he declared, "Why should not the Bible regain the place it once held as a school book? Its morals are pure, its examples captivating and noble. The reverence for the sacred book that is thus early impressed lasts long, and probably, if not impressed in infancy, never takes firm hold of the mind." Founding Father Fisher Ames, the man most responsible for the wording of the First Amendment, believed that the most important school book was the Bible.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to the intersection of faith and politics. WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. Thanks for joining us today. Our guest today is Max Lucado. He's one of the most famous pastors in America. In fact, Reader's Digest calls him the best preacher in America. He's written nearly 100 books. We're so thrilled to have you. Pastor Lucado, thanks for coming on, sir.
It's my privilege. I'm very honored to be on your program.
Well, we're excited to have you. It's the first time I've had a chance to interview you. You're not too far from me. I'm in Dripping Springs, just about 45 minutes from you in San Antonio. And I had no idea you were born in San Angelo, Texas.
I was born there. I never lived there. I was born there because the town my parents were living in was so small that the nearest hospital was 2 hours away in San Angelo.
Well, I know where Andrews is, where you grew up. I went to school in San Angelo is the only reason I brought that up. So great new book.
Right.
Now, you've written on just about every subject on the planet, but this is your first book on fatherhood. What made you decide to do this one?
Well, I have several times during my ministry, I've thought about writing a book that had to do with families. But to be honest, I didn't feel like I had anything unique to say. I did a lot of preaching at our church about fatherhood and marriage and, relationships, but I never felt like I really had anything unique to say, except in the last few years, I've felt an increasing burden for fathers in our society, and how the challenge of being a dad and the importance of being a good dad. And then I think the big thing to me was increasingly meeting people who had a hard time understanding God because of their father. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That when they would hear somebody say, God is the Father, our Father who art in heaven, or talk to your God like a father, well, their own personal experience with their father had been so destructive or negative that they had to overcome that. And so those two or three things came together, and I thought, I need to speak out a little bit more, if I can, encouraging men, because we are the first definition to God that a child has. And so I wanted to try to speak into that conversation just a little bit and see if I could encourage dads in that role.
How hard is it today for dads to keep the priority of the family? We get pulled in so many different directions, and you can also err on the side of, well, I'm just going to spend time with my family all the time and not go provide. I see that sometimes. And then you have the other end of it where we work ourselves to death and miss out on the kids growing up. You seem to emphasize how important it is to have that time with the kids, but keep a good balance.
Balance is the key, isn't it? There are some challenges to our society, to our generation, that we're all aware of. I'm not saying anything new here, because we're all aware that parents these days are torn in directions that our parents were not, and our children are faced with temptations and struggles that we were not. Parents are torn in directions because many jobs these days expect or demand that a person travel a lot, or maybe put in more hours, or commute to a distant place, whereas many of us had fathers or at least grandparents whose offices or farms or places of work were not far away from us. And then as far as the young people go today, the temptations and struggles of internet and social media, I think, are just simply unbelievable. When you think that every young person today unless there is some type of filter or some type of protection from their parents, has immediate access to over 200 stations on the TV, many of which are teaching pornography, or some of which are. I don't know if many of which are, and on the internet. If there's not some filter, if there's not some protection, then our young people are being exposed to a brand of sexuality that will literally destroy their morality and make them struggle with the issues of sexual temptation the rest of their lives. So that's kind of a long, sorry for kind of going on there, but those are very important issues, and they require, here's where the dad steps in. We dads have to provide and protect. Those are the two words. We provide. We make sure our children don't go hungry. They don't get cold. They're not unduly uncomfortable. We're not saying they're rich. We're not saying they're, living off a trust fund. But we take the idea of fear of hunger, fear of going unprovided off the table. And we protect. We spiritually protect. We physically protect. We're the first ones to pray for our kids. We're the first ones to step in between them and these outside influences. We do monitor their lives. And so those are our assignments. Now, exactly how that works it out on the time scale is a challenge, but it can be done. It can be done. And I challenge dads, if you can just make that your objective, to provide for your kids and to protect your kids, and then allow your career, seek a career that allows you to do those two things. It's a payoff and investment that you'll never regret.
You speak to the issue of basically not being a perfect parent. We all tend to drop the ball, and you say in the book, I'm not a hero, I'm not a superstar, I'm not unusual, I'm a parent. And we do have our ups and downs in parenting. How do you get through those tough times as a parent?
We do. We all have challenges. We misstep. I have. We all do. I think there are two things, though, that we can all come back to. Two things. Number one, children spell love with 4 letters, T-I-M-E. They just want time. They want hang time. They want play time. They want talk time. They want us to be around near bedtime. We can do that. If we can understand, we don't have to have the right answer every time. We may not understand everything about discipline or philosophy. We may not be able to understand everything in the Bible that our children ask us, or even about life they ask. But if they know we are near, we're available, we give them our time, I think that's important. And I think number two, here this is really important. Every parent can do this. We can introduce our children to God. That's what we do. We take them to God. And our children know that we are there to teach them to pray, to teach them to understand the Bible, to teach them that God loves them, that God's preparing them for heaven. We just give them these basic tools. If we do those two things, if we say, okay, I'm going to give my children time, I'm going to show up at their games, I'm going to be at their recital, I'm going to be there to tuck them in at night whenever I physically can. And then number two, we say, okay, I'm going to let them learn about God. How can I help them learn about God? Then I have found that 90% of all of our challenges are solved.
Max Lucado is our guest. The book is called Dad Time, Savoring the God-Given Moments of Fatherhood. Stay with us. We'll be right back on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Christians have always believed that the greatest life-changing experience available to any individual is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and the testimonies of numerous converts confirm the dramatic changes which often accompany salvation. One such testimony of change comes from founding father Noah Webster, who explained, "I was led by a spontaneous impulse to repentance, prayer, and entire submission and surrender of myself to my Maker and Redeemer. I now began to understand and relish many parts of the Scriptures which before appeared mysterious and unintelligible. In short, my view of the Scriptures, of religion, of the whole Christian scheme of salvation, and of God's moral government are very much changed. The power of God to change a life yielded to Him was just as evident at the time of the Founding Fathers as it still is today."
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Our guest today is Max Lucado. The book is called Dad Time, Savoring the God-Given Moments of Fatherhood. And we're back with Pastor Lucado right now, talking about the gift of fatherhood and also the responsibility that comes with it. How do you deal with right now there's so many young people that are walking away from the faith in college and in their 20s. And as I'm reading and I'm watching some of what's happening, it seems like the reason a lot of times is they claim hypocrisy in the parents and maybe the parents talked about living a Christian life, but we're all sinners, we all make mistakes, and they weren't necessarily open with the kids whenever they did wrong or sinned against their child in some way in anger or whatever. How do you get help to inoculate against that? Is it just being more transparent with your kids and more willing to ask for their forgiveness when you mess up? I mean, what's the best way to keep them from ever feeling like, well, I thought mom or dad was this, and then later found out they weren't quite as good as I thought they were?
Well, that is an outstanding question, and that really takes us to our own personal relationship with God, because as a dad, I cannot transfer to my children a faith that I do not have. I cannot teach them a grace that I have yet to experience. And so my desire as a dad is to first experience God myself, to know Him, and to walk with Him, and then that will be transmitted to my children. I think the word authentic is a very important word. You're right. I think the young people today, my children and even younger children, they have a hypocrisy sensor.
Yeah, they do.
They're able to sniff it out. But you know what? If you if you seek God yourself, if you walk with God yourself, if you do your best to just live out your faith, some wonderful things happen. I love to tell a story, if I can, about my own dad, about my own father. And this is going to really date me because it involves something called checkbooks. Nobody uses a checkbook anymore. But I remember when I was 15, 14 years of age. For whatever reason, I was rummaging around in my father's desk drawer. Now, my dad was a mechanic for Exxon Pipeline. So he didn't have a big desk. He didn't do a lot at a desk, but that's where he paid his bills, and that's where he kept his checkbook. And I think I must have been looking for a pen or something. For some whatever reason, I came across his checkbook. I opened it up, and I can remember to this day finding his checkbook ledger, and he had sat down at the beginning of the year, the calendar year, and written 52 checks to the little church that we attended in West Texas, one for each week. Now, I don't know where he kept those checks, but he had already written in the ledger the check number and the amount. In other words, he had decided at the beginning of the year to go ahead and write his weekly giving or offering or tithe check.
That's committed.
To the church. Yeah, and he had them in a stack somewhere. So on Sundays, all he had to do was grab the check, put it in his pocket, and take it to church. He didn't have to make the decision. So I stumbled across that. My dad never gave me a lesson on tithing. He never talked to me about giving. But look how that lesson has stuck with me nearly a half century later. I can still remember that. And that's what I think children are looking for. That's what they need. They just need to stumble across their parents' faith. If what they see their parents professing in a church does not match up to what they see in the carpool, they're going to pick up on that.
Mm.
And so that challenges me as a dad to live my faith and know that as I walk it out in an authentic way, my child will notice and he will pick it up.
How much more of a burden did you feel to do that well once your first child was born? How much did that change you and really make you realize how big of a deal it is to be a dad?
It did. And you know what? That was good for me. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with me being aware that there are sets of little eyes watching me everywhere I go and imitating me. I remember when my daughter Jenna was maybe a year old, and I went to ask her to do something, and she said to me, "I can't right now." Well, where did she hear that from? That's what I would say to her. And that's true. I couldn't right then, but she said it in a way that I thought, oh, no, she's picking up on everything I'm saying. And so it made me guard my words and be careful about what I express to her. And I think that's good for our own faith.
Yeah, no doubt. So last question for you about your own experience as a father. What has been the most rewarding part? You've got 3, right? 3 daughters?
I have 3 daughters. One of them is about to turn 30. One's 27. One's 28. And one's 25.
So 30 years of fatherhood. What's been the most rewarding part so far?
Well, maybe I can say it this way. You know, I've been privileged to be a pastor of a great church. I still am in San Antonio, Texas. It's a growing church. It's a healthy church. I've been privileged to write a lot of books and travel to a lot of places. But I would give all of that in a heartbeat for the simple joy that I have of sitting down at whenever we have our 3 daughters in one city and knowing that they're happy, that they're content, that they're growing in their faith, and they're finding their place in life. And nothing gives me greater joy than to see my children are walking with the Lord. And if I could sit down with any young dad or a dad who's about to become a dad, and I would say go 30 years in the future and ask yourself, what would it take right now for you? What decisions do you need to make as a young dad so that 30 years from now, your children are walking with the Lord, they've discovered their spiritual gifts, they know what it means to be saved by grace, they're content, no life is perfect, but they're content in their faith, and what would it take for you to do that? Now, whatever it is, you do it.
Wow.
Just do it. It's worth it.
No doubt. No greater joy. No question about it. I love how you said that, too, because it does need to be purposeful, right? I mean, we need to plan. We need to think about what we're doing, not just stumble through this.
It's not accidental.
Yeah.
You have to say no to certain things so you can say yes to the right things.
Yeah.
So decide what the right things are and just do it.
Savoring the God-given moments of fatherhood is called Dad Time. Max Lucado, the author. Pastor Lucado, we're thrilled to have you with us, sir. Thank you for coming on today.
If we're ever in San Angelo together, we'll hook up.
Hey, we might have to go eat at Zentner's daughter sometime.
There you go.
God bless you, brother. Thanks for coming on.
All the best. Thank you.
Back in a moment with David Barton.
Hey guys, this is Tim Barton with WallBuilders, and I know you hear my dad and Rick talk a lot about our founding fathers, about the original intent of our nation, the constitutional heritage that we have, and really we've seen how far we've slipped away from that. And I know a lot of us, as we hear my dad and Rick talk, think, I wish there was a place that I could go and I could see these documents, and I could read and learn about the founding fathers firsthand, see the things they did. And I want to give you some websites today that can help you accomplish that very thing. If you get online, you can go to places like Library of Congress, and you can look under their Century of Lawmaking or historical documents. You can go to the Avalon Project, to the Founders Constitution, to Google Books, or even the Internet Archives, or you can just go to WallBuilders' website. We have a section for our library, and under that section we have different subgroups for historical documents, historical writings, even a place where you can get helpful links to find out more information about other websites where you can do research for yourself and find the truth for yourself. Friends, this is a time that we need to know who we are and where we came from. WallBuilders.com is a great place to go.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks to Max Lucado for being on the program as well. Check out that book, Dad Time. You can get it just about anywhere. And, David, if we want good government, we got to start with that basic nucleus, that basic unit of government, the family.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he's put really an emphasis on the leadership of the father in the home. I love the point you guys draw about, because kids today do have a hypocrisy sensor. They can tell when you're not being genuine. That's why I've been really struck with the younger generation that, here I am with my color hair that I have, and I get these kids flock. I get jammed with kids after a presentation, and they want to sit and talk, and they want to pick your brain, and they can sense something that's genuine and something that's not. And back in my generation, we would never sit down with somebody with my color hair. I mean, they're from the wrong generation. So these kids think differently today. And he's right that you can't transfer to your kids a faith that you don't have. You want your kids to have faith, you can't give them something you don't have. And that's why we have known for decades, literally, that children have a tendency to create God in the image of their father. And if they've got a bad father image, they have real trouble understanding God. If they've got a father that won't forgive, they have real trouble accepting God's forgiveness. If they have a father that doesn't display love, they have a real difficulty understanding God's love for them. And so that has always been part of the problems. And so if you think from a biblical standpoint what God is, who cares what fathers are? But if fathers think from a biblical standpoint about what God is and recognize my kids see God in the image of me, God is consistent, so I need to be consistent. God is disciplined, self-control, and He uses discipline. I need to do the same. God rewards the good, punishes the bad. I need to do the same. God is balanced and stable. I need to be the same. God has integrity. God is not loose with His words, and He keeps His words. I need to do the same. I mean, just think of all the traits we have from God. He's not soft. He does display leadership. All the things. His consistency, that's what we want. That's what our kids need. And that's what they need to see from us. So I really appreciate Max focusing in on fathers, because they have really been shoved to the side culturally in the last 20 years. And the family has paid a price for that, but it's just one of those leadership principles that works. And you need fathers who help their kids understand what God looks like and how God acts.
And what the best example, obviously, is God our Father. I mean, you're going through that list, and I'm thinking, man, that's an area I need to improve. That's an area I need to improve. And you just gave us the greatest place to look for the example to be able to improve in those areas. Thanks for listening today, folks. You're listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.